So I'm a chairman of the English Democrats, of the Workers' of England Union, and a solicitor. What I think is, rather echoing the previous speaker, we do have a real problem with our politics. We have the Lib Lab Con, who at least pretend to be in power, but they don't actually react to what we want. Our politics, our laws, and even our press and all the rest of the way that the system works is really quite anti-democratic. I don't know if anybody saw the interview with Emily Maitlis of Keir Starmer, in which she asked him whether he preferred to be at Westminster or at Davos. And without any hesitation, he said Davos. And he said that Westminster was just tribal, it was just an arguing spot and nothing of any use at all. I don't think that clip has got quite as much publicity as it really ought to, because it really tells us something about what's going on, I think. We need to be considering ways in which we can react to what's going on. I've got a few points to mention. First of all, the whole net zero thing. We're not far here from Mayor Khan's ULEZ expansion scheme. There is currently a case being brought in the High Court, which I'm the solicitor in, and we've got our first hearing on the 14th. We're challenging the legality of the ULEZ expansion. My KC is quite hopeful. He said he doesn't want to pin them by the toe or hurt them on the toe. He prefers to go for the heart. So that's potentially good. The previous speaker mentioned the energy bill. Now the energy bill is absolutely outrageous, as he was rightly saying. But it does show the fact that they're saying that they're going to use, as they call it, reasonable force to install the smart meters, so-called, shows that it's not in our interest. You wouldn't need to use reasonable force if it was in our interest. Obviously we'd do it. The fact that they're talking about using reasonable force to install it shows it's not in our interest, whatever the politicians might try and say. Boris, I think Boris must be one of those people who he's obviously very persuasive, which is why he's got so many children by different women. But unfortunately, he seems to have got all our knickers off, and that's the way he behaved. He told us what we wanted to hear, and he got voted in, and then he did it completely the opposite. I mean, take us as a for instance. One of the things he was saying he was going to do, he was going to reduce mass immigration. What did he do, in fact? He opened the doors and vastly increased immigration to the point where in his last full year as Prime Minister, they had granted over 1 million visas. Now, I noticed that the media, when they talk about how many people are coming in, they talk about the visas. Well, a visa isn't one person necessarily. It's up to 12 people. Yeah, the whole family. So actually, when in the last year we're told that 1.2 million visas were granted whilst the current government was in, that could easily be 3 million people. Could easily be that. And that 3 million people, after all, is 3 Greater Manchesters in 1 year coming in. We simply haven't got the infrastructure, the resources, the economy. Just looking at those things, we haven't got the backup to enable that to happen sustainably. Then you've got obviously the issues of damage to our culture, our way of life, and everything else. Then we've got also the whole business of lockdown that we went through. Now, the Workers of England Union, which I'm the chairman of, were pleased because we tried to challenge that. We took it through the courts and we got as far as we were allowed to go, but that wasn't very far. we didn't succeed in overturning any part of the lockdown in terms of the court challenge. Now, why is that? Well, the answer to that is how the judges are appointed. Ever since Tony Blair was Prime Minister, they've changed the appointment system. You're no longer appointed to be a judge because you're a good lawyer, and the system isn't even attempting to appoint such people. It is focused, and it says on the Judicial Appointments Commission website that the first thing they're going to consider is whether or not you can demonstrate a lifetime's commitment to equality and diversity. Now, equality and diversity doesn't, those words are, if you look them up in the dictionary, they're conflicting. So it's obviously a jargon expression, and it's a jargon expression for statist multiculturalist, basically. And the point is that if you're in the High Court challenging the state, which, as I say, I am again this week, and challenging expansions of powers of the state, you've got your work cut out, because the judge is against you, because he's in favour of increasing the power of the state, and he's also in favour of increasing the power of the state to work against what people want, because that multiculturalism is a doctrine whereby what you're saying is that the majority should never get its way, and it should be changed, and somebody who has qualified as a judge is therefore somebody who believes that the state should be used to frustrate the will of the majority rather than to put it into effect. In other words, it's basically and fundamentally undemocratic. I mean, I'll give you quite a good for instance. I brought a case when we were trying to get out of the EU. The notice period had expired. So on normal legal principles, when the notice period expires for you coming out, you're out. It's as simple as that. So we brought the case, and one of the judges that dealt with this and said that he disapproved of the case was Lord Justice Hickenbottom. Turns out he's a fellow of the European Legal Institute, and the fellows of the European Legal Institute are people who have committed to working behind the scenes to further deepen and broaden EU law. So I've got an activist, a pro-EU activist, sitting on this case, deciding what should happen about it. And that is where we are with the legal system now. And what that means is, not only have we got problems with politics, as the last speaker was pointing out, but we've also got problems with the law. And of course, normally, one of the other remedies that people will go for if the law and politics don't work for them is to protest. Well, what has the government been doing? They've been clamping down on the right to protest, making it more and more difficult for you to protest. They are trying to shut down protests, definitely. Political correctness. So, obviously, the Conservative Party, it'd be very hard to point to anything that they're conservative about. They're almost identical on almost every political point to the Labour Party. The only difference is they lie about things. And at the moment, there's been a new initiative in the NHS whereby many of the NHS trusts, over 50 of them so far, have adopted a employee code of practice whereby you're not allowed to say anything that any multiculturalist would disapprove of at work, or on your social media, or in any other way that they can discover, and that they will in principle sack you if you do. What can we do about that? Well, the answer to that is that people who are affected by that need to join a trade union. They need to join a trade union that will actually protect them. And there is only one, and that's the Workers of England Union. Thank you. You may like to know that during the whole lockdown situation and the coronavirus epidemic and all the rest of it, there was only one union that was prepared to stand up for its members, and that actually was the Workers of England Union. We had an interesting example of just how corrupted, in a sense, the main unions are, because one of our new members had been a member of Unison for 15 years or thereabouts. She never asked them to do anything. She had asthma. She was told she had to wear a mask. She said she couldn't. It would be not physically possible for her. And so she wanted to grievance the business of wearing the mask. And so Unison wrote to her and said they wouldn't help her because what she wanted was against Labour Party policy. So they're not willing to help unless it fits in with their politics. Now, there's one other instance, I think, which I've just mentioned very quickly because I've been given a 2-minute warning. That we just had the trial and conviction of Lucy Letby. Now, this is based on, as far as I could see, from any of the reports, completely circumstantial evidence. There was no direct evidence of it at all. And the trial took 10 months. Now, that's an extraordinarily long time for a murder trial to take. And she was acquitted on some things, and there were only majority verdicts that convicted her. Now, it's worth bearing in mind where we are in terms of legal reforms, because 40 years ago, she wouldn't have been convicted, because you had to have a unanimous verdict for a start, not majority. You couldn't convict somebody on circumstantial evidence of murder. And the whole way in which trials now work, criminal trials now work, is geared towards securing convictions. That's what they've been doing, politicians, in all the various criminal justice reforms over the last 40 years. They've been making it easier and easier to convict people. Could I just be allowed to read a very short poem? Because one of the things I've been saying is we need to be thinking about what we're going to do, what we're doing to organise ourselves. And I just want to read a poem by Charles Mackay. He was one of the Chartists, the people who were campaigning in the 19th century for votes. And he said, his poem is, "You have no enemies, you say. Alas, my friend, the boast is poor. He who has mingled in the fray of duty that the brave endure must have made foes. If you have none, small is the work that you have done. You've hit no traitor on the hip. You've dashed no cup from perjured lip. You've never turned the wrong to right. You've been a coward in the fight." Let's all make sure we're not cowards in the fight. Thank you.